Thank you all for coming today. We're going to go ahead and get started. We're very thankful for this great turnout, so thanks for being here, you guys. It's going to be a fun one. Tonight you'll hear about the exciting challenges and traditions of the month of May in Indy, and learn more about the venue that hosts the greatest spectacle in racing, which happens to be right in our backyard. Now I would like to welcome the SBLA President, Anthony Ranto, to the stage to introduce our speaker.
Hello everyone, welcome. So tonight our guest speaker is the president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Mr. Doug Boles. Mr. Boles graduated with a bachelor's degree in journalism from Butler University and a law degree from Indiana University. Prior to his presidency, he was the vice president of communication at the IMS and director of governmental and corporate affairs for the mayor of Indianapolis. Additionally, he was also the COO and co-owner of Panther Racing. In his free time, you can find Mr. Boles cheering on his Butler Bulldogs in March Madness, making friends with race fans all over the world, and posting the latest and greatest hashtags for his over 9,500 Twitter followers. With his stories and lessons, you can only learn in the racing industry. Mr. Boles will have us all asking at the end of this, is it May yet? Please join me in welcoming the president of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, Mr. Doug Boles.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. This is a fantastic turnout, so I appreciate that, especially on NCAA basketball night. So how many of you are going to watch on your mobile phone what's going on there while we're chatting? I'll try to make it entertaining and not too boring. And if they're Purdue's, is Purdue now or are they late? They're later, right? They're late. I don't care much until tomorrow when the Bulldogs are actually playing. But thank you again for having me. This is fantastic. I mean, you guys share a name with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway that's important to all of us, the city of Indianapolis. And without the city of Indianapolis and what it really stood for, and at some level what it lacked in the early 1900s, I wouldn't be here standing today representing the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But the reason it has existed and sustained itself for 108 years, and this year getting ready to run the 101st running of the Indianapolis 500, is really largely in part because of this community. Last year for our 100th running of the Indy 500, we sold the venue out. So over 350,000 people inside the Indianapolis Motor Speedway last year for the Indy 500. And people often ask, why did that happen? And it really didn't have much to do with me, or frankly, much to do with my staff at all. And I say that a little tongue-in-cheek, the staff worked their tail off. But it really has to do with this community. The community of Indianapolis has embraced the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Indianapolis 500 like no other. And last year, the people in this community came out like crazy to support the Speedway. Whether they bought a ticket and came, or whether they just stayed at home and watched it on TV, everybody in this community seemed to be very, very excited and very, very proud of the fact that the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was there. Much like this university and the importance of University of Indianapolis here on the south side of Indianapolis and for this community, you guys are brands for this community as they go forward. Just by show of hands, how many of you have been to the Indianapolis 500 race day before? Terrific. How many of you were in the snake pit last year? So I'll start out with a fun snake pit story just because it really is targeted at folks that are your age. Several years ago, sort of organically, inside the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, an event or an area became known as the Snake Pit. It was an area inside Turn 1 where people came to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway not really to watch the Indianapolis 500, but really to fellowship, in a polite term, with their friends and buddies. And oftentimes, the folks that came to the Snake Pit didn't even know really that a race was going on because they spent too much time drinking beer and hanging out and having a great big party time with their friends. If you Google the Snake Pit and take a look at it, you will see photos, black and white photos of people that living in the mud pits and really had no idea that racing took place. In the 80s, the management of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway felt like it was really important that the Speedway become more family-oriented. So we actually eliminated the Snake Pit. And when that did, it actually eliminated a little bit of what makes the event special. Our facility inside the racetrack is 275 acres. On race day, we're the second largest city in the state of Indiana inside the racetrack. Our hospital is the busiest level 1 trauma center in the state of Indiana. And that allows you to do all kinds of things inside that venue, including have that old snake pit. Well, the snake pit went away, And one of the things that went away with it, as the 80s turned into the 90s, we started losing a generation of race fans. Young people weren't coming to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway anymore, and the average attendee at the Speedway, in fact, today the average attendee at the Speedway, I just turned 50, is 50 years old, a white male, is typically the person that purchases our tickets. And I've challenged our team over the last few years that if we don't figure out a way to reverse that trend, next year it'll be a 51-year-old white male and it's a 52-year-old white male. You know where this ends up. There's nobody left at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway because everybody is dying as they get older. Or they can't walk anymore and they can't get around that second largest city in the state of Indiana. So in 2011, we decided to revive the snake pit. But we did it in a way that was a little bit different. We tried to figure out how we could attract young adults under the age of 25. It skews a little bit higher. There's some folks in there that reach the age of 30. If I walk in there, people would stare at me because I'm way too old to be inside the snake pit. And last year, that snake pit, the music that takes place in the snake pit was responsible for 30,000 of those 350,000 plus people that were at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Your whole generation provides a great opportunity, but an unbelievable challenge, not just for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, but every brand across the globe. Everyone wants to figure out how to make you a loyal customer of their brand, of their product, and you are all extremely difficult, and you have tools that nobody else had, no other generation really had, that makes it even more of a challenge. When I grew up, if somebody wanted to advertise or capture me, they captured me through radio, and they captured me through TV, and maybe targeted me a little bit through my automotive magazines that I read. But that was pretty easy to figure out how to find me. You guys are all over the map, right? Some of you probably don't have TVs. Some of you consume all of your information on your handheld device. Some of you are on computers. You're all over the map. So you're really, really difficult to find. And that's absolutely true for the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Plus, we have a product that doesn't necessarily connect to you guys like it connected to my generation or the generations before me. How many of you in here don't have a driver's license? So it's pretty amazing, really. So here's some college students without driver's license. How many of you in here didn't get your driver's license on the first day you were eligible to get it when you were 16 years old? When I was 16 years old, or when I was 15 years old, I couldn't wait to be 16 because the day that I got my driver's license was the day I got my freedom from my parents. It meant that I could get in my car and drive away and go hang out with my buddies and tell my parents that I was going to leave and I'd see you later that night or I'd see you the next day. That was what allowed me to have my freedom. You guys have had freedom from the moment you've had a cell phone, from the moment you've had a computer. You've had a freedom that we never had. And that's a lot of the ways you have socially networked, you have gotten to know each other. So that's the challenge for us. Well, what the snake pit allowed us to do is we took music and a genre of music that many of you enjoy and made that part of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Indianapolis 500 event. What was a challenge for me in the balancing act that I have with my brand, and you'll see this with other brands as you do your studies through school, the challenge with my brand is what makes it special and sets it apart is its 108 years of history and tradition, and in particular the 100 years of running of the Indianapolis 500. So there are things that are really important to the DNA of the Indy 500. 500 miles, Memorial Day weekend, back home again in Indiana, sung before the race takes place, balloons that are launched when the cars head down the front stretch. All of those things that are so, a bottle of milk, for example, when the driver wins, all of those things are really important to my brand. But when you get further and further away from that, I have an opportunity to change it. The problem is, for the people that are older than I am, they have their idea of exactly how that brand should be. And those things that I just talked to you are central to our DNA. And I would tell you that if I walked away from one of those, I would essentially be abandoning what makes the brand special. But there's a group of our folks that have taken habits and started to call them traditions. So I got in this battle where I said, we need younger people to start coming to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And the snake pit was that way to do that. Well, who were the first people to complain? Well, they were the people that were older than I was who were offended that you would take a snake pit name and apply it to something else that wasn't the true snake pit. And at the same time, well, oh my gosh, those people aren't race fans. And I always have fun conversations with those people when that's the way they start. Because I can say, well, how did you start? Well, I started in the real snake pit. You remember who won the first race you attended? Absolutely, I remember. Did you see any of that race? Well, absolutely, I didn't. I don't remember getting home. They were there for the party, right? The difference between what happened with those folks and what happens with you all, when you buy a ticket, and generally you're paying with your credit card, you're probably giving us some ID. I can email, I can begin to communicate with you, but the challenge for me is I have to figure out how to take you from being that music fan and turning you into, maybe not a race fan, but at least an Indianapolis 500 Memorial Day Sunday tradition. That's what we want you to eventually grow into. I want you to become a ticket customer. So when I have that conversation with those fans that started in the snake pit, they begin to understand it. And especially when you tell them that without your generation and the generations to follow you, becoming Indianapolis Motor Speedway and Indy 500 fans, there could be a day without the Indianapolis 500. And I don't believe that is true. But that is something that's a challenge. So as you guys go out in business, you're going to find all these unique challenges in whatever brand you work in, whatever field you choose to follow. And I would encourage each of you to really begin to, when you work somewhere, get to know the history, get to understand why that brand exists. What was its mission originally? How has it deviated from that mission as it's grown? And how can you help continue to grow that brand? How can you help make it change, whether it needs a subtle change like the Indianapolis Motor Speedway does, keep that brand, that DNA central, but then figure out how I can adjust it in a way to attract the next generation? Or is it a brand that needs a complete remakeover? At some level, the last 5 years for me have been really exciting because I feel like I'm an 108-year-old startup. We're trying to figure out how to rebuild our brand. So of those 350,000 customers that were in the venue last year, how many of you think that of those 350,000 of them, over 50% are race fans? It's impressive that you don't think that's the case because, so we've got one that believes it. If you define a race fan by someone who would watch another race during a year, not attend one, but at least watch one, over 70% of the people who attend the Indianapolis 500 don't watch another race the rest of the year. I'm not even talking about attending, it's even less than that attend. They don't watch another one, but they are completely attracted to the brand. There are so many people that come to our event that have got 40, 50, 60, 70 years or more, and a lot of those people consecutive in the way they move, the way that they move. So I've got this really strange brand, right? So when you might immediately think, well, it's just racing, what's it about? Well, my fan doesn't think it's just racing. They think it's an entire experience, which is another challenge on the surface. If we just hired somebody brand new to come in, they think they're working for a racing company, when at the end of the day, you're working for an event company, but you don't know it because we're known for what we do with the Indianapolis 500 and the racing that goes on our racetrack. So I encourage you guys, that first job you take, understand that brand, understand that company you're working for. I think it's really important, and you'll find that you will do a lot better in that piece. One of the other things I wanted to talk about briefly was one big thing with a sort of a small example inside of it. For those of you that have passions, things that you get up every day and you can't stop thinking about, if there are things that you really care about, find ways to continue to chase that passion, especially when you're younger. Don't give up on it. I've loved motorsport my whole life. I could have never dreamed that I would end up the president of the world's largest single-day sporting event, and the thing that I dreamed about the most as a kid, the Indianapolis 500 and the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. But I stayed really focused on how can I keep, even when I was in a job that had nothing really to do with motorsport, how could I tie elements of that job into that sport? And with a little persistence and continue to stay focused, you might find out that you just have that job that you never dreamed about because you never could have dreamed about it, and it really is truly that dream job that's a special one. So, especially as you're younger, when you don't have some of the commitments that happen as you get older and you get married and you have a family, you have a house and you have the mortgage on that house and you have a car, those are that you're paying, and all the things that happen, you end up with less and less and less flexibility. So when you're in your early years, don't sell out those dreams, don't sell out those hopes that you have, don't sell out that passion that you have for something else. It is really, really important, and you'll find that it'll set a great foundation for you as you go forward. The other thing that I think is important to remember, it's pretty easy in this world when we know everything about everybody, and we know how much money an athlete makes, or we know how much money somebody that's running a public company is making in millions and millions of dollars. We know how many billions Zuckerberg's worth, and all of these folks, it seems like, oh my gosh, I could be that person. And oftentimes we forget what the value of a dollar is, and more importantly, what the value of hard work is. So my first job in motorsport was as a sophomore at Butler University. I had an opportunity to work in the media center.